Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. Having personally suffered through all 8 episodes of that deplorable series entitled The Acolyte, and thinking that audiences wouldn't have to be subjected to another Star Wars series for quite a while, Disney dropped the first trailer for its next upcoming live-action Star Wars series entitled Skeleton Crew, thanks to D23, which occurred this past weekend in Anaheim, California. And this isn't the only trailer that Disney dropped during D23. But before proceeding, I'd like to ask everyone to please like this video, please leave a comment, please subscribe to support this channel, and please press the bell to receive notifications. Thanks! So let's talk about the first trailer for Skeleton Crew. Logistically, the trailer is 1 minute and 41 seconds in length. And as of the time that I'm recording this video, the trailer is partially ratioed with 51,000 likes and 24,000 dislikes. And the only big star who eventually gets paraded in the trailer is Jude Law, who I can only assume must have been very desperate for money to attach himself to a Star Wars series that's clearly intended for very young audiences. I personally can't imagine any other reason why Jude Law would want to be in a children's fantasy show like Skeleton Crew, though he did play a younger version of Albus Dumbledore in 2 of the 3 Fantastic Beasts movies, with the last one, 2022's The Secrets of Dumbledore, failing to break even. So he's no stranger to fantasy narratives, which also includes his role of Vortigern in 2017's King Arthur Legend of the Sword, and voicing the character of Pitch for the 2012 animated movie Rise of the Guardians. He's also going to be reprising his role of Dr. Watson in a planned 3rd Sherlock Holmes movie, which is currently in pre-production according to IMDb. But trying to bring star power into a new streaming series is a common strategy for Disney, which they just recently tried to do for the ill-fated Star Wars series The Acolyte. In its early teasers and the May 4th trailer, Disney and Lucasfilm really tried to play up the fact that actress Carrie-Anne Moss was in the series. But to the disappointment of many viewers, her character of Jedi Master Indara was killed off in the first scene of the first episode. And then she only briefly appeared in the 2 flashback episodes 3 and 7, and her character was never fully developed because she wasn't actually one of the show's principal characters. She was only a minor tertiary character, even though Disney's marketing made it seem like she had a much more significant role in the show's narrative than she actually did. In other words, Carrie-Anne Moss's presence may have been nothing more than a marketing gimmick to try and attract a larger audience for the show, which it ultimately failed to do. So just as with The Acolyte, Jude Law's character in Skeleton Crew may also be just some minor tertiary character who may just be another marketing gimmick and nothing more. Remember the character of Captain Phasma in J.R.R. Abrams' 2015 movie Star Wars VII: The Force Awakens? The marketing made her appear to be a lot more important in the movie than she actually was, and she turned out to be just another minor tertiary character too. And that was 9 years ago. But in addition to not knowing how important Jude Law's character might be in Skeleton Crew, there's also the possibility, as suggested by the trailer, that he could be a Jedi, and that in of itself creates confusion thanks to the Acolyte again. And the reason for that confusion is because not even 1 month ago, Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistant, Leslye Headland, made it completely clear that as far as she's concerned, the Jedi and the Jedi Order itself are nothing more than hypocrites and a completely corrupt institution. And that was, in fact, Leslye Headland's entire purpose for the Acolyte, as I had talked about in multiple videos, including one that I had released on July 27th. So to see multiple child characters in Skeleton Crew being in awe of a possible Jedi character suggests that he might be a more traditionally understood selfless and good Jedi, which would be totally incongruent with the Acolyte, Leslye Headland, and Kathleen Kennedy's trade-reported excitement of everything that Leslye Headland did in the Acolyte, to include portraying the Jedi and the Jedi Order as being totally hypocritical and corrupt. Thus, is Jude Law's character in Skeleton Crew going to be a traditionally selfless and good Jedi, or like one of Leslye Headland's reimagined hypocritical and corrupt Jedi? In fact, is the intent of the Skeleton Crew series, which has multiple child characters in it who apparently hold the Jedi in high esteem, for them to find out that the Jedi are actually hypocritical and corrupt, as they were depicted in Leslye Headland's show The Acolyte? These are legitimate questions, and I really wouldn't be shocked if the latter is the case. But if Jude Law's character is a Jedi and he's portrayed as a traditionally selfless and good Jedi throughout the Skeleton Crew series, then what exactly are audience members supposed to believe about the Jedi following how they were portrayed in The Acolyte? The Acolyte by itself introduced numerous inconsistencies into the Star Wars franchise, and following it up with a series like Skeleton Crew could introduce even more inconsistencies. J.R.R. Tolkien released a literary paper in 1947 entitled On Fairy Stories, in which he talked about an audience's ability to willingly suspend their disbelief. And in that paper, which I have linked in the description for this video, what Tolkien essentially said is that a successful storymaker is able to create what Tolkien described as an imaginary secondary world that a reader or an audience is able to mentally enter into that's completely separate from the real world. And that secondary world is the imaginary reality in which the storymaker's narrative occurs, and is thus part of what the storymaker creates as part of the narrative itself. So for very well-written narratives that are very enjoyable or compelling, an audience can be so pulled into that storymaker's imaginary reality that they accept what's occurring within it as being totally normal within the context of the narrative, as they stop thinking about the real world and its physical limitations. In other words, it's the essence of escapism. And I, and undoubtedly many of you who are watching this video, have experienced that multiple times. For myself, I have experienced it with franchises such as Star Wars before George Lucas sold it to Disney, with Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, with J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle-earth, with Frank Herbert's Dune, with J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter stories, and with several others. But conversely, what happens if there are inconsistencies within a storymaker's narrative? For an audience, it becomes far less likely that they'll be able to enter into that storymaker's imagined reality because it fails to make sense, as our minds instead focus on the inconsistencies themselves. In other words, it may become a battle in one's own mind as you attempt to enjoy and get into the story's imaginary reality, but then you eventually succumb to and accept the fact that the inconsistencies have made it impossible to do so. And the best example that I have of personally experiencing that was when I watched Ruin Johnson's 2017 movie Star Wars VIII: The Last Jedi on the night that it premiered, because I tried to enjoy what I was watching, but that slowly became impossible as I became increasingly stunned and appalled by what I was watching. And as I walked out of the movie theater along with hundreds of others, no one said a word, because everyone who had sat there and watched that movie was too shocked to say anything, which was a complete reversal to the boisterous whooping and hollering that people were making when they left theaters after watching J.R.R. Abrams' Star Wars VII: The Force Awakens 2 years earlier, the night that that movie premiered. Now, to Tolkien, being unable to enter into a storymaker's secondary world is the kind of scenario that he personally viewed as the time in which an audience has to instead attempt to willingly suspend their disbelief in an effort to try to enjoy a storymaker's flawed story. And yes, that is what I attempted to do when I watched The Last Jedi on the night that it premiered. But if the inconsistencies within a narrative become too numerous, then more and more people will eventually find it too intolerable, as Tolkien himself described it, and will eventually abandon the narrative altogether, which will become more problematic if the narrative is part of a larger franchise. How many people abandoned the Star Wars franchise after The Last Jedi premiered? How many more people abandoned the franchise after J.R.R. Abrams' dumpster fire of a movie, Star Wars 9: The Rise of Palpatine, premiered? How many remaining fans abandoned the franchise after 2023's ill-fated third season of The Mandalorian premiered? And what happened with The Acolyte? Viewership numbers for the show, which were never that large to begin with, dwindled to the point where they were no longer reportable in Nielsen's weekly viewership updates after the show's third episode premiered, because Nielsen only reports the top 10 most viewed shows and movies in 4 categories, as I talked about in a recent video. In other words, the narrative in The Acolyte was abandoned by viewers after they watched episode 3, which included the lesbian space witches and revealed that the twin sisters, May and Osha, who were among the show's main characters, were created by the Force by their lesbian space witch mother, Mother Anasia, as played by Jodie Turner-Smith.
Yes.
And the twins' creation via the Force was ultimately incongruent with the birth of Anakin Skywalker via the Force in George Lucas's 1999 prequel Star Wars I: The Phantom Menace, which has been a long-established part of Star Wars lore for a quarter century. So it was in no way surprising to me that viewers began to abandon the show after its third episode. But were the Jedi ever perfect? No, and even George Lucas demonstrated that in his prequel trilogy, but they had never previously been shown to be totally corrupt and hypocritical, as in Leslye Headland's The Acolyte, with Kathleen Kennedy gushing about how much she loved the series shortly before it premiered, while simultaneously attacking all male Star Wars fans, as I had talked about in a video that I had released on May 30th. So I think that the confusion regarding the Jedi and the Jedi Order that Disney, Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, and Leslye Headland have recently injected into the Star Wars franchise is a very valid question, since the very next live-action series entitled Skeleton Crew has what appears to be a Jedi character in it, and showing the child characters all being awestruck by him. So looking at the trailer itself, it begins showing a young curly-haired boy, as played by actor Ravi Cabot-Conyers, lying in bed in his very real-world appearing bedroom as he looks upwards towards model ships that are hanging down as part of a mobile. So he's obviously longing for some kind of an adventure. Then he's shown glumly riding in the back of a school bus with other kids as he's staring out the rear window, again as if he's longing for some kind of an adventure. Then he's shown sitting in a very large classroom of some kind before the trailer switches to 2 young girls, as played by actresses Ryan Kira Armstrong and Carrie-Anne Crater, riding on a speeder zipping through traffic composed of floating cars and going from an urban to a very real-world appearing suburban environment. Then the curly-haired boy is shown talking to a young elephant-like alien before the scene switches to showing the boy running through a very real-world appearing suburban neighborhood that looks like it could be part of any city in North America. So up to this point, the series doesn't feel particularly like Star Wars as much as it does to a movie like 1985's adventure movie, The Goonies. Then the curly-haired boy is seen looking at an iPad-like device showing a CGI image depicting a Jedi holding a lightsaber in front of a large creature. Then the curly-haired boy and the young elephant alien child open what looks like a garage door and find the 2 girls who were seen riding the speeder bike earlier in the trailer. The 4 of them are eventually shown wandering out into the woods that looks a lot like British Columbia to what the curly-haired boy thinks is an entrance to an old Jedi temple. And as the door opens, they walk in, and they eventually encounter what looks like One-Eyed Willie from, again, the 1985 movie entitled The Goonies. So more than halfway into this trailer, everything shown feels more like the Goonies than Star Wars, which makes Skeleton Crew feel like it's going to be nothing more than a highly derivative and not a particularly imaginative or original show. But instead of an old Jedi temple, it appears to be a spaceship of some kind that suddenly whisks them away on their adventure with One-Eyed Willie, which might be the literal skeleton crew of this apparently long-forgotten spaceship. Then they fly off somewhere into space, encountering various creatures, including Jawas, an owl creature wearing a cape, an old droid, and a giant alien reptile thing, before curly-haired boy is shown getting into a laser gun turret of some kind and opening fire. Then one of the girls is seen looking up into the sky and sees two X-Wing fighters, before curly-haired boy and the other girl are seen in a prison cell, with the key being telekinetically levitated by the Force, presumably by Jude Law's character that may or may not be a Jedi. And that's it. So most of the trailer looks like modern-day real-world suburbia, which is not particularly in-universe in terms of what Star Wars typically looks like. And Jude Law's possible Jedi character is highly problematic, given how the Jedi were depicted in Leslye Headland's show The Acolyte, which was essentially rejected by practically everyone, as the show's incredibly low viewership numbers attest to, as well as the show's incredibly low audience ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, and Metacritic. But given all of that, I don't think that Skeleton Crew will actually be worse than The Acolyte, but thanks to The Acolyte, which was undoubtedly very damaging to the Star Wars franchise as a whole, it may actually keep many from wanting to bother watching Skeleton Crew at all. That was the risk that Kathleen Kennedy and Disney were willing to take by allowing Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistant, Leslye Headland, to come in and undermine George Lucas's legacy and the Jedi Order itself far more than any other previous Disney Star Wars series had ever done. And it's still too early to say whether Skeleton Crew might include similar elements to The Acolyte, which if it does, will very quickly sink it into obscurity. So will Skeleton Crew be worth watching? Only time will tell, but I seriously doubt it. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.